So welcome to, like I said, the Thriving at Work Balancing Active Leadership webinar. I am the project manager for this project, and I have been working with a number of our delivery partners and colleagues at Better Connect to deliver the Thriving at Work project. So I'm going to give a really brief introduction to the project, how you can get involved, and then I'm going to hand over to Sam, who will deliver the main content of the webinar. So Thriving at Work, it was dreamed up by Sam, who is our main speaker today, with a project vision of inclusive, accessible and healthy workplaces that increase productivity and create an environment where all employees can thrive. From that vision, the project really has sort of developed into three main elements. So it's a three-pronged approach to improving inclusive practices, really. So the first of these sort of elements is the inclusive workplaces. So this is a package of support for SMEs, so small, medium and size enterprises, which really drill into kind of 6 key areas that can help with making your workplace more inclusive and more diverse. So looking at policies and governance, recruitment and induction, culture and values, staff skills and training, reasonable adjustment and support, and also looking at quality standards and pledges. We've got a dedicated team of partners that specialise in supporting SMEs, which can help any organisation of these sizes in any of these sort of aspects to become more inclusive and more diverse. The second of our strands is the diversity training element. And this is really available for any employed member of staff, so from any sized organisation that are really looking to broaden their knowledge about sort of neurodiversity, disabilities and work limiting health conditions, and sort of mental health challenges that people face that might sort of affect their ability to thrive at work. And sort of we provide sort of different training courses. Some are half day, some are full day, and some are 2 day, where people can come and learn about each of those sorts of topics. And then sort of the last one is our workplace support. This is kind of really the nitty gritty of what we've done as a project management company for a number of years, where we provide one-to-one support packages for employed individuals. These individuals must have a disability or a work limiting health condition, be neurodiverse, or have mental health challenges, and we can work with them, our partnership can work with them to sort of really support them to thrive in the workplace. I think it's important to mention at this stage that none of these sort of conditions have to be diagnosed. It's a self-declaration and sort of an opportunity for individuals to kind of say, I have this concern or I have this condition and I would really like some help to thrive at work. You know, we spend a lot of our adult life in the workplace, and it should be somewhere that's enjoyable, where you feel supported and where you can thrive. I'm going to take this opportunity now to hand over to Sam, and she's going to tell you a little bit about herself and sort of what the rest of the webinar is going to be about.
Fabulous, thank you, Emma. Okay, so a little bit about me. My name's Sam Alexander. I am the CEO of Better Connect. I am also a member of the Local Enterprise Partnership Board, chair of the Skills Board, and the Social Inclusion Lead for the LEP. Additionally to all of this, I'm also a yoga teacher and have a real passion for well-being, both in terms of personal well-being for individuals and also in the workplace, and how we can make sure that we have the best workplace well-being that we can. Okay, so the learning aims for the session today. After the session, attendees will understand how the mental health and well-being of leaders impacts the organisation, be aware of the 5 stages of burnout and recognise potential warning signs to look out for, and create a toolbox of maintenance and in-the-moment actions that can support your own mental health and well-being. So I want to start with a couple of definitions. So the first one is in relation to leadership. So leadership is a process of social influence which maximizes the efforts of others towards the achievement of a goal. And I really like this definition because it isn't hierarchical. It isn't about you have a certain job title or a certain position. It is about this sense of social influence and of working with others towards something. And it could be in a workplace environment, and it could be a work-related goal, but there's all sorts of different kinds of leadership that we'll be aware of. Another definition that I wanted to cover right from the beginning is about mental health. So looking at what is mental health, and this is the World Health Organization definition: the state of well-being in which every individual realizes his or her own potential, can cope with the normal stresses of life, and can work productively and fruitfully, and is able to make a contribution to her or his community. And this is really about mental health in that positive framing. Often we talk about mental health when mental health has deteriorated or where there's been a challenge, but really looking at it in terms of that state of well-being. And the language that I'm going to use through the webinar today is very much going to be that focus around well-being, that state of well-being, that is a sign of really positive mental health. So the first thing that I just wanted to get you guys involved with actually is to have a little bit of a think about how leaders impact organizations that they lead. Now, this is both in terms of a leader that might be, somebody in a CEO position, but also leadership at every level within an organization. So it could be leaders and people that are maybe leading a small team or leading a project, and just starting to think a little bit. And you can share this in the chat, and Emma will be able to sort of share anything that people have contributed here. And I just started off with a couple of examples there around leaders setting the company culture, and leaders choosing what is a priority. So do jot down anything else that you can think of about ways in which a leader impacts the organization. I'll just give you a couple of minutes to have a think about that and share it in the chat.
So we've got how they make decisions, leaders look ahead and plan for successful future of organisations.
Fabulous, yeah, absolutely. A lot of that kind of big picture stuff where leaders can really be involved.
Managing change effectively, sharing their expertise with teams and colleagues, are really good points.
Fabulous. Okay, so here's some things that I had come up with where I was thinking about different ways that as leaders we impact the organization. Some of the kind of more structural things like policies, procedures, setting the mission, the direction. We also have a big impact in terms of workload, people's sense of belonging, the language that we use, the way that we're engaged. So there's quite a wide range of ways as leaders that we impact the organization. And thinking again, so once again, just to share in the chat about what are the impacts of deteriorating well-being. So this isn't just for leaders, but this is anybody in an organization of where we're maybe starting to feel less of that, all those positive things from that first definition on that slide of what are the impacts on us as individuals when we're maybe not feeling as well, not thriving as much. So again, I put a couple of ideas in there about reduction in concentration, tiredness, low energy, poor sleep, anything else that you can think of that might be an impact of deteriorating well-being.
Misunderstanding and communication, that's a really good one. Being less productive, inefficiencies. Seem to be negative and uninterested.
Yeah, absolutely. There's some great ideas in there.
Strained relationships with colleagues, different engagement levels, lack of motivation. Um,
Yeah, fabulous. You got loads of stuff there that I hadn't even thought about, but there's some of the other ones that I'd put in there. It can be about tiredness, maybe getting poor sleep, irritability, overwhelm. We might be engaging in certain kinds of behavior like numbing or avoidance, brain fog, lots of different things where, and none of them positive. We don't tend to have positive things that come from not taking care of our own well-being. Fabulous. Okay, so why is well-being of leaders particularly important? That's obviously the kind of crux of what we're looking at in the presentation today. So the first one, and this is really important to me, is because leaders are also people and we deserve the level of well-being that we aspire to create for our own teams. I think often when we are in a position of leadership, we can sort of take on a lot of responsibility around that and feel like, you know, we've got a certain role that we need to fulfill. There's something that we need to be doing. Often we can be quite self-sacrificing, but the first thing that is really, really important to me is that I think that well-being of everybody, including leaders, is really important. But the question here is, what's particularly important for those of us who are in a more management or leadership role? And the real kind of crux of this is that what we do and how we're able to show up for work has a significant impact on every aspect of our organization and the people in it. The more influence that we have, the more decisions that we're making, the more that those decisions impact other people, the more of an impact that our well-being actually has on everybody else. And just looking at that impact and kind of digging into it a little bit. So the first thing that I thought about here is that sometimes you might even remember this from something like your parents said, you know, do as I say, not as I do. But that's actually not how people work. People do as we do. And if we are saying things like, we think that well-being is really important, we think it's really essential that we look after ourselves, and then people can see that we're not doing that ourselves. There's an authenticity issue there, and people maybe are thinking, maybe well-being's not that important actually, because if it was, maybe you'd be taking that more seriously. So we need to be aware also, particularly where people maybe look up to us as leaders, or they aspire to be more like us, that they will then emulate the behaviors that they see. And so if they see behaviors where it looks like we're not taking good care of our well-being, that people might end up doing that themselves. We cannot give what we don't have. So often, with all of the best intentions in the world, there might be things that we want to do for our team, for our organizations, for the clients that we serve, for the people that we want to help. But if we've run dry, if we're not looking after ourselves and building that sense of well-being, we might not have the energy to be able to do the things that we want to do. So there is that sense of, you know, the thing that they say on aeroplanes about put your own oxygen mask on first. If we want to have that energy and that focus and that ability to help others, then we do have to start with ourselves. When we're not at our best, when we're not feeling the best we possibly can, we don't do our best work. And this is a difficult one. I find this hard because we could still be putting in the maximum amount of effort, and often we are. You know, if we are feeling like everything is much harder, we could still be putting in a huge amount of effort and really trying. But if we're not in a kind of vibrant place and really looking after our well-being, what we're able to do is not going to be of the same quality as what we would be able to do under other circumstances. This is a really interesting one, looking at psychological safety at work. So as leaders, part of what we want to do is we want to create a really positive, empowered culture. We want people to feel safe in the work that they're doing and coming into work. But actually, if as leaders, we're not feeling in a good place, we talked about some of those things about when our well-being deteriorates, some of the things that can happen. Where we could be maybe a bit impatient or maybe a bit less tolerant. We might on one day feel like, actually, I'm going to say something's really important or call out a certain behavior or really go to the effort of praising somebody. And then there might be another day where actually we're feeling much more kind of worn down and we don't seem to have the energy to be able to do that, or we don't feel we don't notice things. And that inconsistency where we maybe behave one way on one day but a different way on another day can erode that sense of psychological safety that we work hard to create as leaders. And our well-being affects our actions. So you guys came up with that when we were looking at the impact of deteriorating well-being, and our actions as leaders particularly affect everybody within our organizations. And then lastly, is something that we're going to come on to a little bit more in this presentation, is about looking at the impact of burnout. So burnout for leaders can be significant. If we have a significant impact, a significant influence in the organizations we lead, then us having a sense of burnout and actually, in the worst case scenario, completely burning out and maybe not being able to work, is going to have an even bigger impact. So why don't we prioritize our own health and well-being as leaders? It seems kind of everything that we've been talking about up to now, like, oh, it's a bit of a no-brainer. Obviously, we would do that, but we don't do that all of the time, and it can feel like there's really, really good reasons why we don't do that. So again, I've jotted down a couple of those. Maybe something about thinking we need to prioritize the needs of others over ourselves, or feeling like we don't have time to be able to do that along with everything else that we're doing. But I'd love to hear from you guys about reasons either that you have experienced personally, or just things that you have noticed with other people, or ideas that you have about why we might not be prioritizing our own health and well-being.
Feeling too busy. Being unaware of your own well-being and mental health, so obviously not knowing that you're struggling or maybe not thriving as you would want to be.
Yeah, that is such an important one. It's so easy for us to just get our heads down and be so busy. It's the kind of wood for the trees in a way, where we're not really kind of maybe noticing things. And there's a great saying that I really like that said, we can't read the label from the inside of the jar. And I have a range of people in my life who I would describe them as my label readers. So I would say, if you notice something that I've not noticed, then let me know. But that is a really, really great point.
I've had another couple of others as well. So not having time to reflect and sort of ensuring that others are happy obviously takes time away from you being able to manage your own happiness or your own workload as well.
Yeah, absolutely. That competing demands that we have of ourselves and of others. So I've got a couple of those down on there, and a few different things as well. So that lack of time, I think that is so huge. Feeling like I'm fine, whether or not we're genuinely believing that, or whether we just say that. Maybe fear of judgment, actually, of, if everybody else seems to be really stressed and really busy, like, do I want to seem like I'm the only one that's not? Different things about stigma, maybe having an identity as being a strong person, or being a person that, I don't need to take care of these kind of things, it's fine, I can handle it, I can take it. So moving on to look at burnout. So I've got another definition here that I wanted to share about burnout. So It's a form of exhaustion caused by constantly feeling swamped. It's a result of excessive and prolonged emotional, physical, and mental stress. In many cases, burnout is related to one's job. Burnout happens when you're overwhelmed, emotionally drained, and unable to keep up with life's incessant demands. And that is obviously, you know, really, really significant, and not a place that any of us want either ourselves or anybody in our team to get into. But we're going to have a little explore of this idea of burnout and what it looks like. So based on research from the Winona State University, 5 stages of burnout were identified. And you'll see from this diagram, and we've got the source of the diagram down at the bottom there, that actually the first stage of burnout is kind of work wellness, is positive. But with so many things in terms of mental health, it's not an on-off switch. It's not everything's suddenly fine on one day and then on the next day it's in absolute crisis or chaos and there was nothing in between. Often with these kind of things, there is a kind of staging, but it can be quite subtle. And as different things maybe start to deteriorate or start to feel more challenging, it can be easy, like one of you guys had put in the comments, for us to not notice that shift and to not see that changing. So we'll just dig in a little bit to these different stages. So stage 1, this is often at the beginning of a new role or project. There will be some stresses. You know, we're not going to have any lives or workplaces where there is no stress at all. But in this stage 1 of burnout, it really does feel like it's manageable. It feels like, yes, maybe this stress comes up, but I can handle it. I've got time, I've got space. Things that you would be seeing in this stage 1, probably actually quite high productivity and energy levels, a feeling of job satisfaction, creativity. This one, these kind of bottom 2, a little bit more where you maybe get into the warning signs. So a compulsion to prove oneself. So there can be a bit of a heightened sense of energy and kind of like movement, and we've got to do this, and a bit of a sense of urgency that can be coming in there, and maybe a kind of a sense of unbridled optimism. So nothing's gone wrong yet, everything feels like, you know, it's okay and it's great. And one of the things in this sort of stage 1, looking at that kind of honeymoon stage, is that ideally we want to wrap things around us that mean that we stay in this stage and that it doesn't progress and it doesn't get onto the next stage, which is actually the beginnings of stress. So when this stress is really starting to come in, when you notice the first signs of stress and they're maybe affecting you, it could be emotionally, physically, some different things in there might be about anxiety, fatigue, irritability, some of the things that you guys mentioned in the presentation. And some other kind of little warning signs that might start coming in at this point, avoiding decision making. So things kind of coming and thinking, oh, I can't deal with that now, I'll deal with that later, and putting things off. In terms of your physical health, maybe noticing poor sleep or a feeling of fatigue, maybe experiencing lower amounts of productivity than you were having in stage 1. So stage 1, it was kind of like everything's feeling great, feeling really productive, really energized. At this stage, you might already be starting to see some reduced social interaction. So links in with that kind of avoidance of things, just starting to see the cracks coming really at this stage. By stage 3, it is much more frequent. So you're switching from it mostly feeling really, really good, with some maybe more difficult bits, to actually it's starting to feel much more challenging and difficult. And lower levels of motivation happening by this stage. You might actually even be getting into sense of worry, panic, anxiety. Things in your wider life are probably starting to be affected by this as well. So maybe you had hobbies previously, but you're actually not doing those anymore. You're not engaging as much. You've kind of dropped out of things, sort of personal connections. Maybe you're starting to isolate yourself a little bit more from the people in your life that, you know, are really important to you. an uptake of escapist activities. So this could be a whole range of different things, from maybe anything from caffeine, could be about TV or social media, it could be about alcohol consumption, other things where it's about actually sort of really trying to get away from a sense of real life. And in a workplace, this might be seen as sort of missed deadlines, procrastinating, really the next stage up from that, worrying about decision making and things like that. So stage 4, we actually move into burnout. So this is where it really becomes critical. And often at this stage, continuing as normal is not possible. It becomes increasingly difficult to cope. This is often the stage maybe where people might have to have time off work, where the body really is kind of sending very strong signals to say, we can't keep going at this in this way. So you might get physical things like chronic headaches, stomach pain, back problems. There'll be different things that can happen on a physical level. Can be feelings of emptiness and maybe even sort of self-doubt and things. I know from my experience previously of experiencing burnout, I had a phrase that I would say, where I'd say, stop the world, I want to get off. I would just kind of feel like it's all just too fast and too much, and I can't deal with it anymore. A pessimistic outlook, either on life or work or both of those things at this real kind of burnout stage, and neglecting personal needs. So, you know, you might even have an awareness by this point that actually this isn't working and I really need something else, but not being able to prioritize it. And you would think maybe that this would be the last stage, and that, you know, when people reach this stage, obviously there would be a need to get help. But actually there is stage 5, which is chronic or habitual burnout. So this is where it becomes so embedded that actually this is how we are living. This is what we're doing, and really kind of it's likely to be having quite a significant impact on our mental, our physical, emotional state. That could be about fatigue, physical, mental, sadness, depression, and where it really has become part of how we are operating. And obviously this is not a place that any of us want to be able to get to, and that's as any person in any place within an organization. For this one, I want to get you guys to think about this, and you can share anything in the chat that you want to share, but really it's mostly about you thinking about ways that increased stress might show up in your life and work. So thinking about this on a more specifically about how this affects you personally. Are there patterns or warning signs that you've noticed in your own life? So it might be some of the things that we've talked about there in the different stages of burnout. It might be other things that are a little bit more specific for you. Certainly for me, if I share a couple of my personal ones here, my phone usage, so scrolling, looking at things, being a bit kind of compulsive with checking things, certainly things around like maybe finding it harder to get up in the morning. So have a kind of think about that, and do share in the chat if you would like to share, but don't worry about sharing if you just want to jot these ideas down. I'll just give you a couple of minutes to get those notes down.
So not being able to sleep, thinking too much about, you know, work-related issues or other stuff that's going on.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think for me, I'm the other way around. I end up exhausted. So to the point where, I don't know, it gets to the end of work and you just can't wait to go to bed, tired. But then not always feeling refreshed if you've had that early night. Relentlessly thinking about work even in your sleep, and being haunted by it in a dream.
Yeah, the impact on sleep it can be really, really significant. And I have a reoccurring anxiety dream where I'm at an airport and I don't have the right things that I need. So I'm aware that I'm going to a cold country and I have this tiny bag because all I've packed is like swimwear. And that's always a sign to me where I'm like, okay, what am I not dealing with that I need to give some attention to?
So you're using your phone even when you're away from work to check sort of your emails and your calls, um, worrying about doing enough to please in all areas of your life, putting on a brave face, being snappy with your partner or others outside of work.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think probably even where Emma's reading out things that is not what you typed, I think certainly I can relate to all of those things of being sort of experiences that I've had. And what I'd really encourage you to do is to make your own list of these things, of what are the kind of signs of stress, because part of what we were talking about earlier is that sometimes the reason we don't take care of our own well-being is because we've not noticed that it needs some time or attention. We've not noticed that maybe there's anything going wrong. And I have certainly found in my own life that having a list of almost like behaviors or like physical things that you can see. So the reason that I give the example of sort of being on my phone, most people's phones now I think have that capacity where you can have a look at how many hours have I spent on this device today, and actually looking at those and seeing the trends of those and seeing where that's going up and seeing where, and kind of, you know, the data doesn't lie. So I think that I'm fine. I don't think that there's anything to worry about there. But then I look at it and I think, oh, it's 2 hours higher than it was on this day last week. And it might be that there's a really good reason for that. And you can kind of see that. But I think making your own list so that you're aware of how does stress show up for me, and making a commitment to, when you have noticed that, to say, okay, I'm going to now do something different. I'm going to make an intervention here. I'm going to make a change as a result of knowing this. So I wanted to share with you a fabulous tool that Sean Stevenson had come up with, that he used in his life. And I discovered this about 7 years ago, and I have used this so many times. So Sean talked about, he had created something that he called his When Life Works list. So he had written out everything that was going on in his life when he felt like life was really working. So he describes this as when he's in a sense of flow, when it kind of feels like, yes, there are challenges, but he can overcome them. He's not feeling sort of worn down by anything that's happening in his life. That yes, there's adversity, but it doesn't have that same kind of sense of just making you feel burnt out and like you can't cope with it. And he wrote down a lot of very small things, actually. So these would be not necessarily things that he's saying, you know, here's a to-do list of things that I have to do, but just things that he'd observed that, generally speaking, when he's doing these things, his life works. And I made this list a number of years ago, and I have my list to share with you. So this is what my list looks like. So eating balanced, fresh and varied diet. So when I'm eating well, that is generally a sign that things are pretty good. I'm making time to shop, I'm making time to cook, I'm eating lots of fresh stuff. I feel good as a result of that. This one will not be true for everybody, but for me, going to bed between 9:30 and 10 in the evening and getting up between 5 and 5:30. I'm a real morning person. I like to do lots of different things in the morning. And when that starts to shift, then that can be a bit of a bad sign. Similarly to what Emma said, actually, is whether that's because I'm going to bed an hour later, or actually I'm feeling so exhausted that I have to go to bed an hour earlier, are both kind of warning signs. So for me, having a daily movement practice is really important. Sometimes that's yoga. I also do something called Qigong, walking. it doesn't have to be big things, doesn't have to be, you know, an hour at the gym every single day. That wouldn't be on my list. That wouldn't work for me at all. But knowing that those kind of things and moving and getting in my body. But I do like to have a bit of a longer session, sort of maybe 2 to 3 times a week, of maybe like a yoga class that's an hour long. The one that I'd already mentioned there about having low phone time, no mindless scrolling. When my life's working, I am not scrolling on my phone. And having exciting activities planned with friends, so that there's actually things going on, things to look forward to, and that I'm not working in the evenings, not working at the weekend. So this is my when life works list. It's not a to-do list. It's not something that I'm sort of trying to say I've got to do all of these things. And that framing of that has worked much, much better for me in my life. So I'd like you to think about your when life works list and to jot down some ideas. And you can do this on a piece of paper, on your laptop. If you'd like to share one or more of these in the chat, that would be fab, just to have a bit of a sense of maybe if there's anything that's similar to what I'd put on my list. But also, you know, I think there'll be people who have something that's really quite different. And this is one of the things I love the most about this tool, is that it's not about here's a list of things that everybody has to do and it'll work for everybody. It's really about you personalizing that and making that as real to you and really feel good. Yeah, jot down those ideas and then do share one or more of them in the chat with us as well.
Saying no if necessary, not feeling like you have to do everything. That's a really good one. Saying no is never particularly easy, but it's quite often an absolute necessity to look after yourself, but also to look after everybody else. I've got going for a run once or twice a week. Finding time between meetings to play with children. Ticking things off a non-work related to-do list. I think that's great, having a good balance between work and sort of non-work things to do. Doing something creative. That's a great one for me. I love to bake. Not feeling guilty about having you time, even if it's just sitting and relaxing for an hour. That's so true. You can often feel quite guilty for just almost feeling like you sat doing nothing, but it can be sort of the most beneficial and recuperative for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And just the range of different things in there as well, of people kind of sharing that it isn't that the same thing works for everybody. There's a range of different things that will work for you. And I would encourage you, if you haven't had time to write out a full list as part of this webinar, that this is something that you could actually, you know, carve out half an hour, maybe even make it nice, light a candle, have a nice, get your favorite warm drink or something like that, and really kind of put a little bit of time and focus on making that list, so that you really have that sense of knowing, you know, what is going on for you when life works. So a couple of things that I did want to share in terms of sort of some evidence-based things that will help from a prevention and maintenance point of view. And the thing about wellness is that it is very often pretty kind of intuitive, actually, and it's not rocket science, but I wanted to share a couple of these things because I always find it helpful to get a reminder of them. So we touched on this a few times in some of the exercises, but good diet, exercise, and sleeping habits. So that's not diet in the sense of weight loss or anything like that, and it's not exercise for weight loss. It's about diet, exercise, and sleep habits that make you feel good. It makes you feel good in your body. It makes you feel like you've got a sense of ease, that you are eating things that give you the energy that you need for what you have going on in the day, and that your sleep habits feel like, you know, you're waking up in the morning and you are feeling rested and able to jump out of bed and get on with the day. Taking proper breaks. So there's a load of different levels to this. I love the one in the last exercise about actually like having time between meetings to play with your children. That can also be sometimes I would do it where I would take time between meetings to just make a drink and then watch the clouds, just be looking out the window, watch the birds, just taking that break in your day. I think it's also really important to make sure that our non-work hours, so if you work through the day and maybe finish at 5 o'clock, that your evenings feel like they're a proper break. And that's not just about not working, that's about not thinking about work as well. That your weekends are a proper break. So if you don't work weekends or your days off, but then also actually, I think it's really important to then take, you know, at least a week, if not a couple of weeks in the year where you are completely unplugged, completely switched off, you're not contactable, you're not checking emails, you've got your out of office on, everything is being handled by somebody else, and that can be a real reset there as well. Meeting free days and weeks. This is a new one that I have been trialing recently that has been a bit of a game changer for me, actually. So trying to find at least one day in a week where you don't schedule any calls, any meetings, and you're able to really just focus on other things, because particularly these kind of things are Zoom meetings. If you have a day of 12 Zooms, you kind of get to the last one and you don't know what your name is. So really being able to have that at least one day a week, and then actually maybe if you can, even if it's just a few times a year, having a week where you don't have any calls, you don't have anything where you're getting those extra kind of inputs really, to be able to have that space so that you can really think clearly. This one came up in the last task, so learning the graceful no. I actually sent some emails last week with requests, and I sent emails to about 6 different people, and 4 of the people came back and said, yep, that's great, I can do what you've asked for. 2 of them came back with such lovely emails to say, I'm really sorry I'm not able to do this, but thank you so much for inviting me. Please feel free to ask me again in the future, because if my circumstances change, I would be really interested in this. And I really appreciate the fact that you asked me. And I probably felt as good reading those no's as I did reading the yeses, because I really felt like, oh, actually, you know, people really appreciated that they were offered the opportunity, but also had a huge amount of respect for the fact that people had then done the thing that was right for them. I didn't want people to say yes, but actually be thinking, oh, I don't have time to do this. So that was brilliant. And that's one for me to learn as well. And I've got here, ask 2 questions. So this is something, again, recently that I've been doing with, following a coaching session, actually, about what work was I doing, and was there actually too much work that I was supposed to be doing, or was I just doing other people's work? So the first question that I now ask is this business critical? You know, whatever it is, if it's a request for something, if it's a new piece of work, if it's an idea that I've had, how important to the company is this? And really thinking about it in terms of, you know, is it just a thing that's like, oh yeah, that would be a little bit interesting, or do I have a sense of, no, this is really, really important to do this? The second one is it my job? And it's been amazing the number of things that I had on my to-do list before I answered these questions that I couldn't answer both of these questions yes. So just wanted to pass that one on for you guys to ask those 2 questions. You know, is this genuinely important? Is it actually my job to do it? And a couple of things really about in the moment. So they're all great in terms of maintenance, in terms of prevention, the types of things that we would want to build into our life so we never get to that point of stress, of burnout. But actually, sometimes we have a kind of acutely stressful situation, or we have a sense of stress that we're feeling, and we really do feel that stress in our body. That's the main place where that will come in. So what we want to be doing when we feel stress, it's our sympathetic nervous system, our fight, flight, freeze, that's sort of taking over, and we kind of feel this sense of stress. What we want to do is to activate our parasympathetic nervous system, our rest and digest, the much more kind of calm, peaceful energy that we want to be able to get into, because that's the one where we can think clearly. When we're in that fight, flight, freeze, we're just constantly like a pinball machine, ricocheting from maybe one crisis to the next emergency, to this, to that. You get to the end of the day and you think, I have no idea what I did. What we want to do is get into that parasympathetic nervous system, where actually the brain comes back online. We can think a little bit more clearly about it. And there's really, really simple things that we can do to help with this. So 5 real deep diaphragmatic breaths are incredibly powerful. When our body is reacting to a sense of stress and we're feeling really stressed about something, there's lots of different chemicals in our body that is saying, oh, there's this big threat, there's this big thing, we've got to react to it. And if we can take these 10 breaths really deep into the abdomen, into the belly, long deep breaths, inhale, exhale, and we can have 10 of those, we're actually telling our body there's no saber-toothed tiger. There isn't a massive threat. There isn't some things that we have to deal with. Yes, there might have been an email that was quite irritating. Yes, something might not have gone exactly the way that we wanted it, but it's not the life and death situation that our body is currently believing that it is. And that 10 breaths can be brilliant for that. Somebody had mentioned about the sort of connecting with children. Children can be great. Also nature and animals. So if you've got a pet, if you've got some outside space, being able to kind of get out of the situation that you're in, get out of the physical space, maybe get out into nature. Sometimes I'll go and just touch a tree or something and just have this sense of like, ah, oh, right, okay. I use as well looking at clouds and looking actually just further afield. I'm looking out my window as I'm talking there. You know, everything can feel very tight and closed in, but actually being able to get that wider sense of perspective. Something like a body scan relaxation. So there's loads of different kind of meditations and so many kind of free apps, things on YouTube, various different things. It's very, very easy to get hold of this kind of thing. But being able to do that kind of maybe like a guided body scan where you feel the different parts of your body and you just relax them, can again take it out of that fight, flight, freeze and just create a sense of relaxation in the body. And visualization or imagery. So this is something that is used in even things like trauma therapy, where you have a place that feels safe. It might be an actual place, it might be from a memory, it might be something that you've imagined, but being able to visualize that, being able to see that place and have that sense of safety and allow the body to feel that, it can be really, really good. Mine is actually a specific place that I went to in Mexico, and I really make it very sensory. So I was in the water, there was birds, there was clouds, there was a breeze. I know exactly what that smell was. And when I'm in that place, I can just bring all of those senses back and have this sense of like, ah, right, okay, I'm safe. And then in addition to all of these is just any other activity that you do that makes you feel calm. So there will be things here where it will be a little bit different for you. A couple of you guys had mentioned about creativity and anything where you can kind of get lost into that sense of focusing on something else and not being in that stressful situation. So that sort of brings us through to the end of the focus around well-being, but I wanted to just talk about the sort of key takeaways, really, just to give it a little bit of a summary. So hopefully what you guys are taking away from this session is that your personal well-being is actually business critical. It's not a nice to have. It's not something you'll do when you have time. It's not something that, you know, would be a real luxury. It's something that is actually essential to the organization functioning as well as it possibly can. The second one is that through self-awareness and learning, it is possible to identify our own signs of stress and to take action early that can avoid that situation of burnout that we talked about. And maybe by creating a when life works list, you can identify your own personal wellbeing toolbox and can build in more of these different aspects into your days and your week and ultimately into your lives. So thank you so much for coming along today. I'm going to hand over to Emma because she's going to talk a little bit through some of the other things that we can offer through the project and some next steps following the presentation today.
Thanks, Sam. That was great. So really, this is just an opportunity for me to sort of bring Thriving at Work, bring the project back into focus. A lot of the things that Sam has spoken about today really has underpinned the designing of Thriving at Work and workplace wellbeing, supporting yourself, supporting your teams, you know, really is a priority through this project. It is a European funded project, so with that comes sort of some eligibility criteria for if you did want to get involved in any part of it. What I will say is you can get involved in some stuff and not others. It's not compulsory to do it all, but if you are interested and if you think there's more you can learn or there's more you want to get involved with, please let me know and I'm happy to talk through any of it with you. Like I mentioned previously, anything at an organisational level, you must be a small or medium-sized enterprise, so you have to have less than 250 employees. And then for the diversity training and workplace support, you must be employed. You must be able to prove that you've got right to live and work in the UK and sort of be able to prove your employment status. But the nitty-gritty of the eligibility is definitely something we can go through at a separate time. So sort of moving on to the next steps, if you did want to get involved or if you would like to learn a little bit more about each of the sections of our project or find out about any of our other webinars that we'll be delivering between now and Christmas, please visit our website. You can find all the information that you need from there. My contact details are on the website too, so if you've got any sort of burning questions, you're very welcome to contact me directly as well. And I think, Sam, that brings us to the end.